Hi, this is Paul. I'm an educator, a graduate student in language literacy and culture at the University of California, and occasional columnist at multiversitycomics.com. I'm a Patreon supporter of the Comics Alternative because I really value the coverage that Derek, Andy, and Gwen, and Shawn, and Gene, and Shay, and all the others provide of what I think is one of the most vibrant and vital media that we have in our global society, which is comics. I appreciate the depth and the range of their coverage and their analysis, and I think they provide a vital service to the comics reading community. If you feel the same way, if you value this work too, I encourage you to go to patreon.com/comicsalternative and to be a supporter as well. Thank you for listening, and have fun.
This is the Comics Alternative, episode 175, reviews of the Eltingville Club, Cry Havoc #1, and The Dark and Bloody #1. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Comics Alternative. I'm Derek.
And I'm Gene, and we're two guys with PhDs talking about comics.
That's right. And on this week's episode, Gene and I are going to be discussing 3 recent titles. We're going to begin with Evan Dorkin's The Eltingville Club. After that, we're going to look at issue #1 of Cry Havoc, written by Simon Spurrier with art by Ryan Kelly. And then we're going to wrap up with issue #1 of The Dark and Bloody, written by Shawn Aldridge with art by Scott Godlewski. But before we get into that discussion, we want to let all of you guys know that this episode of the Comics Alternative is brought to you by the great folks at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to their website, dcbservice.com, for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. There you're going to find all DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse titles at 40% off of the cover price if you pre-order. For all of the other publishers, you'll find that those discounts are 20 to 35% off cover price, and every single month you're going to find some unbelievable specials. Sometimes those specials will be at 45% off cover price, sometimes at 50% off, but often the discounts can go higher from there.
And this month we've got things like the Vertigo new title bundle, 15 new Vertigo issues for 50% off. There's a Marvel Kids bundle and a DC Kids bundle, both for 50% off. A DC John Romita Jr. variant bundle special at 45% off, and a bunch more. So check out dcbservice.com for all of that good stuff.
That's right. You can always count on DCB Service for bundle madness. I mean, they got great discounts on, so you pay just a fraction of what you would pay if you got the individual issues separately. So those bundles are definitely a way to go. So go to Discount Comic Book Service's website, dcbservice.com, for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. And after you do get your comics there, please be sure to send them an email and tell them that the two guys with PhDs sent you.
Ka-ching.
Well, Gene, before we get into the nitty-gritty of this week's episode, we have a couple of announcements to make, and the first of which is a message that we received from a listener via SpeakPipe. And so let's go ahead and give that a listen.
Okay.
Hi, this is Anthony Christou. Your podcast is awesome. I like hearing about the comic reviews that you have. I listen to them when I paint my own comic, Luminous Ages, and I hope you guys and girls can review it and have a look at it and see what it's all about. And we're presently on Kickstarter, and we've got 2 more weeks left on our Kickstarter. So you can check it out, Luminous Ages. It's Anthony Christou. Thanks for your podcast. I've been listening in while I paint pictures. It's really good. I like to listen to podcasts, and yours is one of them. Thank you. All the way from Australia, mind you. Check you later.
Wow, thank you, Anthony, for leaving that message, and we appreciate the feedback, and especially using SpeakPipe to leave us a message. Not as many people do that as you would think. I mean, it's very easy to use. And Anthony, it's good to know that as you do your work, that you listen to our podcast. And, just to remind our listeners what they just heard, if you want to find out more about Anthony's comic that he's working on, Luminous Ages, you can check it out on Kickstarter. So go to Kickstarter and search for Luminous Ages. And you can also go to his website, luminousages.com. That's LUMINOUSAGES.com, and you can find some sample art there of that comic.
Yeah, thanks a lot for contacting us that way. And yeah, I can kind of understand why you won't get a lot of speak pipe stuff, because the internet's all about, anonymity and typing, and talking is like, that's so 20th century. But it's very cool when people do it.
It is. So use SpeakPipe just as Anthony did. The other thing I wanted to point out is something that we've mentioned in a previous episode, and that is the current survey that we're running, and we're going to be running for the next month or so. Gene, every now and again we have speculated as to the demographics of our listeners, and we really haven't done anything about that. In other words, we haven't created any surveys or asked people to respond to us. The only reason we would know who's listening to us is when you guys, our listeners, contact us and tell us a little bit about you. But what we've done is we've set up a survey on the website of our host, which is Libsyn. And if you go to survey.libsyn.com/comicsalternative, and that is survey.libsyn, LIBSYN.com/comicsalternative, you'll see a very short survey. And in fact, it's so short, there are only 6 questions that we're asking. And it asks basically, the standard, age, gender, education, things of that sort. So we'd like to get a feel for the kind of listeners that we have. So take a minute or two, go to that website, survey.libsyn.com/comicsalternative, and you'll also find a place to put in your email address. Now, you don't have to include your email address if you don't want to, but if you do, that's right, the big but. If you do, you will be entered into a drawing that we will choose one person who responded to the survey to get an official Comics Alternative t-shirt when we get them printed up later this year.
Fancy.
That's right. So again, go to survey.libsyn, LIBSYN.com/comicsalternative, and let us know who you are. We'd appreciate that.
We want to mine all your data. Well, not all your data, just 6 little data points. Somebody said they were in and out in under a minute.
That's right. It doesn't take long at all. And we should also mention that don't worry about anyone using your email address. The people at Libsyn will not do it. They'll just forward the information to us. And we don't use it for any nefarious purposes.
Yet. No, just kidding. Just kidding.
Well, Gene, you want to get into a discussion of this week's titles?
Yeah, we're starting off with the Eltingville Club by Evan Dorkin. This is a hilarious freaking book. If anybody's been a fan of Evan Dorkin, Milk and Cheese, Space Ghost Coast to Coast, which he co-wrote some episodes with his wife Sarah Dyer, Hectic Planet, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure comic that he did for Marvel.
And Dork.
Dork, yeah, of course. Instant Piano. Lots and lots of good stuff. The Eltingville Club started off in, 95, I think? Something like that?
94. And in fact,
94.
Yeah, the Eltingville Club, and this is a hardbound book from Dark Horse. It comes out, I think the pub date, according to Amazon, is March 1st. So as you're listening to this, if you run out to your local shop to get a copy, it may not be there yet, but it will be out very soon. But the Eltingville Club hardbound edition includes all of the Eltingville stories from the past. These originally appeared in Instant Piano issues number 1 and 3. Those were in 1994 and 1995. Several issues of Dorkin's series from Slave Labor Graphics, Dork, between 1995 and 2001, a bit that appeared in Wizard Magazine number 99, which came out in 1999. Another story that originally appeared in Dark Horse Presents, the second volume, number 12, which came out in 2012. And then most recently, issues number 1 and 2 of Eltingville Club, which came out in 2004 and then 2014 and 2015. So, over the past several years, or quite a number of years, Dorkin has been publishing these Eltingville Club stories through, various publications, and now they're all collected in one nice volume.
Yeah, one nice volume of hate and sadness and geek trivia of all sorts.
That's right. So Gene, for those who were unfamiliar with Eltingville Club, how would you describe this to the uninitiated?
Well, one way is to just give you the actual title of what the club is. The club it's for teenage guys, and they are the Eltingville Comic Book, Science Fiction, Fantasy, Horror, and Role Playing Club. And every one of the 4 members is a secretary of one of those things. And they're 4 socially inept boys, kind of like they're all one of your uber typical fanboys. And they love and hate each other, and they love and hate what they love.
Right.
I think that's a good way to put it. And if you've ever read Milk and Cheese, Dairy Products Gone Bad, every story of those crazy characters winds up in mayhem, and pretty much every Eltingville Club story ends in some sort of mayhem as well. It's a little more realistic than Dairy Products Gone Bad, but not by much. And if you are or have ever been a fan of any sort of thing, you will smile in recognition and cringe in recognition in equal measure.
Yeah, and you're right to point out the cringe part.
Oh God, yes. It's mostly about the cringe, actually.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots to laugh at in the Eltingville Club. As with almost anything that Evan Dorkin writes, I think he is one of the funniest comic creators living today. But at the same time, as you're reading through these short stories, it's almost like watching Larry David, his kind of humor. It leaves you, which I love, though. I mean, don't get me wrong, but it leaves you feeling a little uncomfortable as you laugh. Because, it could be because maybe it hits too close to home, or you're just witnessing people doing things that it's absolutely stupid and ridiculous to the point that it leaves you very on edge and very uncomfortable with the scenario that's being mapped out. But again, you're laughing at it nonetheless. And maybe feeling guilty as you're laughing. So now the Eltingville Club is made up, as you pointed out, Gene, of these 4 teenagers, Bill, Josh, Pete, and Jerry. And with this very first story in the collection, we get to find out a little bit about the roles that each of them plays in the Eltingville Club. Now, Bill, who seems to be the leader of the group, he's the secretary of comic books. Josh, who is the fat one, as they keep reminding him, is the secretary of science fiction. And Pete, who definitely has some issues, he's the secretary of horror, appropriately enough. And then Jerry, I guess he's the George Harrison of this group. You could say he's the secretary of fantasy and gaming, and I call him the George Harrison because he's more quiet than the others.
Yeah, I suppose that makes sense. Yeah, and the fantasy, it's not really mystical, but there's a little of that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But so what we have is a collection of stories where these four individuals get into various situations or scenarios, club meetings. And as you pointed out, things get weird. Things get screwed up, and they end up shooting themselves in the feet, so to speak, at almost every turn. And as much as they try to get ahead, to find a particular toy or an issue of a comic, in other words, be successful in their club, they're always frustrated.
Yeah, and the frustration is kind of carries through for every single aspect of their lives, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about Well, part of it is that the collector's mentality is you never have enough. If a collection is ever finished, you've lost your point of being, actually. And so these guys clearly will never be complete in any way, shape, or form, no matter how hard they try. And one of the nice things about this book, just to jump ahead a little bit, is that because he worked on these stories over the course of almost 10 years, the first story starts off is basically it's a club meeting and it turns into a trivia contest. And that's kind of all it is. It's kind of an excuse to set to just revel in trivia for trivia's sake, and also laugh at how ridiculous these people are for how obsessed they are about the whole thing. But as you go through, it becomes less just about the trivia, although the trivia is always there. It's chock full of any kind of trivia you can think of. But it moves into kind of broader, kind of, I guess, geek cultural issues as well. It also transfers over time as well, because it starts off, they're kind of like mid-teens or whatever, and by the last story, we actually jumped ahead 10 years. It's almost like when Doonesbury makes its big jumps in time or something like that, or Funky Winkerbean. Evan will love to hear this compared to Funky Winkerbean, I'm sure. But we kind of see some progression or not progression in some of the characters as well. So it's not just a one-joke thing. It feels like it could be, but it moves very quickly to kind of broader issues as well, which I like a lot.
Exactly. And one of the things that I guess the potential for a book like this that collects the shorter Eltingville Club stories, over the past 10 years or so, is that these could be very disjointed narratives that one wouldn't necessarily fit into, much less reference another. But reading them from beginning to end in chronological order, I mean, one of the things that Evan Dorkin did was he did create some kind of narrative cohesion. So in the later stories, you will find references to things that went on in earlier stories. So it's almost as if you have a larger novel-esque story going on, where there is more character development, more of a furthering of certain scenarios and personalities and struggles and whatnot. I mean, I think this reads very well as a cohesive text. And, you mentioned the trivia. Now, in the second story in this collection...
It's the second story that's really the big trivia. The first one has a lot of trivia, but the second story is all about the trivia contest.
Bring me the head of Boba Fett. And this is not my favorite, but one of my favorites of this collection. In fact, it's kind of difficult to decide on which is my favorite because all of these stories are just hilarious. But this one, I think, is one of the most developed stories in this collection. And basically what you have is the four go to a comic shop, and there at the comic shop they see this, at least what appears to them to be a pristine, in the original packaging, 12-inch figure of Boba Fett. And so both Bill and Josh fight over this, and they have a duel of trivia. And I don't know how many pages there are of the two of them going back and forth, questioning each other in this trivia off. Whoever is unable to ask or answer the question loses, and then the other one gets the Boba Fett. And as one might expect, Boba Fett itself does not end this story unscathed.
Yeah, the title might be a little clue.
Yeah,
but yeah, and the trivia is hilarious. Not just for the put downs that they give each other all the way through. There's a lot of your mom jokes as well going through, but just the length and depth of the kinds of trivia questions that they ask, from obscure actors to episode titles to whatever. But the sad thing is that I kind of knew most of it, which made me feel real bad. I mean, normally, if you can answer a trivia question, it makes you feel really good. But these guys are really lame and sad, and I kind of knew most of the answers, and it makes me not entirely proud.
That's part of that discomfort we were referencing earlier.
Exactly.
Yeah. And in fact, this story was in many ways the basis of the Adult Swim pilot that was made a number of years ago. Now, have you ever seen that?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, and for those who want to check this out, go to YouTube and look up Eltingville Club, and you'll find it. I'm really sorry that the Eltingville Club In fact, it was called Welcome to Eltingville for the pilot for Adult Swim. I'm sorry that it wasn't picked up, because this could have been hilarious.
It could have been, but at the same time, I think it's good. I mean, there's only, I forget how many stories there actually are in this collection, and I think it's best. I mean, I think it would start to suffer diminishing returns if it had been a real series. Although he does open it up, because the comics themselves, it's pretty much just the four of those guys, and eventually the comic shop owner kind of becomes sort of like a fifth character in some respects. But if you keep it just to these four, there's kind of only so much you can go, and this book really does a good job of covering all that. The TV series would have had to open it up, I think, a bit more. And I'd like to see it, but at the same time, I'm really happy with what we got.
Right. But, even in that pilot, you got to see a character who's not in the comics, and that is Bill's sister. And she could have been a foil that
definitely.
they could have developed in the TV series. And, had that been picked up by Adult Swim, then we would have certainly gotten more Eltingville Club stories, because, Dorkin and his wife would have had to create more. This is not the only really good comic that just didn't take off on Adult Swim. I know that there was a pilot for Michael Kupperman's Shake and Bacon.
Steak and Bacon, yeah.
Yeah, and that was a funny pilot, but it wasn't picked up either.
Yeah, and that was sad, because there was a lot of places you could go with that. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of raw material. But again, I love the comic, so it's not a terrible shame, but I think it would have worked, definitely, because that pilot also worked really well.
Yeah. Now, Millionaires Macchies got picked up for a while. I don't know if they're still doing those, but at least that made it past the pilot. But unfortunately, Eltingville Club and Snake and Bacon didn't. But if you want to see the pilot and only episode of the Eltingville Club, or Welcome to Eltingville, as it's called, then go to YouTube and look that up. And I was mentioning this because it is largely based on the story Bring Me the Head of Boba Fett.
Right.
Yeah. Now, I said earlier it's a little difficult to pinpoint what I consider my favorite, but if I had to, I would say that the story I got the most laughs out of is the Marathon Men.
Oh God! Where they managed to get what they think is one of the guys' homes for 36 hours, because what Sci-Fi Channel is going to show a Twilight Zone marathon every single episode of the Twilight Zone, and they have to make sure that they can stay awake for all 36 hours.
Right, and it's Josh's house that they go, because his parents are away for a few days. And they go to his house. They're getting ready for a 36-hour marathon of the Twilight Zone. And I think their local cable station had just picked up the Sci-Fi Channel, and this is before the Sci-Fi Channel was SYFY. And so they're watching this. They're all excited. They have a lot of caffeine. They have Coke, Jolt Cola. They have some No-Dos, and of course tons of junk food. And it's about what happens as they're watching all of these episodes and their attempts to stay awake. And it gets hilarious.
Yeah, again, things just go as insane as they can possibly go. And there's a great starting on page 34 is when it actually when the marathon itself actually begins. And as you go through, like 35, 36, and 37, those are all like 12 panel pages. That's one thing that Dorkin does. He really gives you enough ink for your dollar. My God. Mm-hmm. But you got a series of 12 of several 12 panel pages where every page gets a little more chaotic, not just what they're saying or what they're doing, but even like the layouts themselves. Like when you get to page 37 or 36, the bottom there, the panel borders start to get a little scratchier. 37, the panel borders are even scratchier. 38, not only the panel borders scratchy, but they're not even parallel anymore. And in the back, you can kind of see the swirling, the gyre of the Twilight Zone kind of opening in the back behind them. Mm-hmm. In the next page, the panels actually just literally shatter into pieces.
Yeah.
It's just beautiful.
Yeah, you're right. On page 39, the panels really break down, and in fact, the borders around them look like shattered glass. And this is where things get really, I guess, at their low point in this story, where they just can't take it anymore. And Jerry, for instance, completely loses it. He just pukes everything up that he's been consuming. You know, all the junk food, all the caffeinated beverage, and also all the Funyuns, the no-dos, and whatever drugs that had been in Jerome's. Or not Jerome's, or maybe
Jerry.
It is Jerome's. Jerry. No, Jerry's the one who's throwing up, but the...
Josh.
Josh, yeah. Josh's mother's medicine. They don't know what that is, but they take it thinking it'll keep them awake, and it screws them up.
Mother's little helpers.
Yes. I mean, this is just a wild story, and I think this is one of the wildest scenes of all the stories, and that, along with the fact that I'm a Twilight Zone fan, I really did appreciate the story, The Marathon Men.
Yeah, they're all fun. And one thing that I wanted to bring up, I compared this to Funky Winker Bean earlier, which is, again, a horrible comparison. Another comparison I wanted to bring up, though, is to Bill Griffith and Zippy the Pinhead.
Yes.
Because a lot of what Zippy does is there's a lot of hate-love that happens in the Zippy comic strips also. Railing against pop culture, railing against Hello Kitty or whatever, but at the same time, you can't rail against something that good without actually knowing it and kind of loving it yourself already. And there's a lot of hate-love happening throughout Eltingville as well. Clearly, Dorkin, as he says in the back of the book, he's got a couple of essays in there, and the book really comes out of love. It comes out of love as much as it comes out of hate. It's kind of hate. He's kind of hating this. He's kind of hating the sinners, but kind of loving the sin almost, because he doesn't really have any empathy for the guy so much. But clearly, he loves he loves the idea behind the lifestyle as well. It's just that people always take it to the wrong sorts of extremes.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that reminds me of Bill Griffith is that, again, like I said, how many other people give you this much ink per page? Griffith is the same way. There's more art. There's more just like physical drawing in one Zippy the Pinhead daily comic strip than it is in like a week's worth of just about any other comic strip in the newspaper. And Dorkin is the same way. He fills these pages with little what you would call, Bill, there's chicken fat. There's little jokes in the backgrounds everywhere, and just so many words in the page also. These pages are really, really dense. It can be a fast read, but at the same time, there's a lot to get through. He gives you so much information on every page and every panel. He is obsessing over this stuff just as much as these guys obsess over their trivia. And that's one of the things that I love about it.
You know, and I'm glad that you made that comparison to Griffith's Zippy the Pinhead. I definitely see where you're coming from there. But I don't know. I feel that in Zippy, Griffith's critique has a sharper edge to it, and it's not as it's a little more caustic and more critical than the kind of critique that we get in Dorkin's Eltingville Club.
There's a difference of degree, definitely. There's a lot more kind of larger social critiques, I think, that Griffith is trying to make, but at the same time, there's still the thing that he hates the stuff so much, but he's still a part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. Yeah, and both of them.
But you're totally right about just kind of the sharpness of the critique.
Yeah, and you know, this is definitely the case with Dorkin. And as you pointed out, there are a couple of essays in the back, and one in particular where he actually does set a context, and he tells us more or less what you just described, that he is part of this culture, that Evan Dorkin himself grew up in many ways like the members of the Eltingville Club, and he even describes a few incidences that are based from his own life experiences that he worked into some of these stories. So, I mean, he can empathize with these guys while at the same time he makes fun of the culture. And, you know, he lets us know that in many ways, the four members of the Eltingville Club represents kind of a dark side of pop culture and fandom in particular for him, that while at the same time there is this sense of empathy, there's nonetheless something nefarious going on that he is criticizing in his own way.
Right, yeah, and he points out the kind of like the nasty letters and things like that, and just we've seen just with things like Gamergate and stuff like that. Just in real life, especially on the internet, it allows anybody who obsesses over anything to take things to extremes and not just care about things to themselves or whatever, but to lash out at other people, whether it's other fans or other creators. Unfortunately, a lot of times it's men lashing out at women, which, again, just going back to the Gamergate and stuff like that. And that's a thing that he really despises, and one of the reasons I think why he said he's not doing this anymore, just because it's almost gotten too bad in real life.
Yeah, and he says as much. And in fact, in that essay, in the last few paragraphs, it almost seems that Dorkin is kind of losing faith in fan culture, and he just wants to wash his hands of it, which is why he says, this is all of the Eltingville Club will ever get.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things that follows that essay is something that I find really interesting. I want to talk about this for a minute, and that is the West Coast version of the Eltingville Club, and this is the Northwest Comics with an X Collective.
I had forgotten this existed, and I'm so happy it's here.
And so basically what he does is, if with the Eltingville Club, he takes to task mainstream comics and pop culture, with the Northwest Comics Collective, he really does skewer this more artsy, literary, alternative, if you want to call it, comics culture, both the writers as well as the critics. In other words, many who may think that they're a little more intelligent, a little more hipper than thou, and they don't want to have anything to do with the mainstream. So,
right, almost one might say guys with PhDs.
Yeah, yeah.
There's wannabe paid. It's the quote unquote highbrow version of the Eltingville Club, but all the arguments and the self-obsessions are just as petty and just as sad.
Right, but the four members of this club, and their names are Aaron, Jay or Jaybird, Rodney, and James. These are comic creators themselves, so they're not so much the fans or the critics, but they're the creators. And I wanted to ask you, did you think that the character Aaron Winkleman is a little more than a tip of the pen to Art Spiegelman?
I suppose the name is sort of
the name and the way he's dressed, because he wears a black vest.
He's got the vest, yeah. But at the same time, you said these are creators, not fans. These are fans who want to be creators, but they suck.
Yeah, but at least with the Eltingville Club, I mean, they don't really try their hands at comics or anything else, but much. These guys do.
Yeah, they're trying, but again, hell, I did a mini comic in the 90s. Everybody was kind of trying it out as well, I think. But these are still, I think it's still the fan sort of thing. It's the fan wannabe thing. Why won't they let me into their club? Because they're always trying to they're sending off their shitty mini comics to other to established creators, trying to get pull quotes or try to do trades and stuff like that. Northwest Comics presents Anarchy Inc. One of the covers there. Oh God, my baby's dead. Mind-blowing comics from the future of graphic literature. That's the cover of one of their...
and that's what they call their art. Not comics, but graphic literature.
Right, yeah. They've got their own pretensions, but again, they're just as angry as they... They're just angry and sad in their own way. As he said, they're not as crazy as their mainstream counterparts, but just as worth making fun of.
Right. And just as caustic.
Exactly. And just as self-destructive.
Yeah. And in fact, there's something almost more caustic about this group of creators, the Northwest Comics Collective, than the Eltingville Club. I think, and maybe it's just because they seem much more bitter.
Oh yeah, they're extremely bitter. But again, it's the Northwest in the '90s. It's there's a little grunge happening there, I think, as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But again, I just love again, you looking in the background, so all the different comics that they have laying around, and all the names that they drop. They drop just as many names as Eltingville do, but they're all of again the alternative nature.
Yeah, and you know, Dorkin's just having a good time here because in this book, not only does he have fun at the expense of mainstream pop culture, comics in particular, but also the more hoity-toity alternative side of things. I know at one point in the Northwest Comics Collective, the guys are talking about, I don't know, whatever it is, and one of them asks the other, who do you find sexier, Jessica Abel or Julie Douchet?
Yeah.
Little things like that, and because you mentioned the name dropping, there's tons of names being dropped here. Both creators as well as journalists themselves. For instance, Fantagraphics and the Comics Journal. They're lampooned as well.
Yeah, and there's the one panel where they're talking about the reviews, and one of them's holding a thing that says Indie, Star Wars Report, Fizz, Maximum Rock and Roll, Flipside, Giant Robot, Alternative Press Review, Geezus, Thorazine, Probe, Creepy, and just like I know, I own copies of most of those publications myself. Again, so it's everything goes a little close. It hits a little close to the bone.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I absolutely love the Eltingville Club. It hits close to a variety of bones.
Yeah, and it's so well done, and it makes you think a little bit, but it makes you laugh and it makes you cringe a whole ton. And again, the very last Eltingville story, again, where they kind of do the 10-year flash forward, and you see how people have progressed in their lives, and how those lives can fall apart just as easily because the four of them together are the worst thing possible.
Yeah, and this last story of the Eltingville Club, and again, not counting the Northwest Comics Collective, which actually ends this, or at least in terms of the stories, it ends the volume.
There shall be an epilogue.
Yeah, this is probably the nastiest that things get.
Oh,
because
it's really nasty.
One of the things that generates the chaos in this story is that Jeremy has a girlfriend, and so the four of them meet up at a big Comic-Con, and at this con, Jeremy's girlfriend comes over, and it's almost as if she's like the Yoko Ono, and she causes the big split. And what actually causes this is that Bill just goes crazy, and he starts wailing on her, and he calls her, certain things that we will not mention on the show. I mean, really nasty things. So this gets wild linguistically, visually, and otherwise.
Yeah, it's from Bill's point of view, it's a Yoko factor, but in fact, it's the real Yoko factor. Yoko was not really the problem with the Beatles. Right. It was the Beatles had the problems themselves, and there was just a convenient. She was a convenient scapegoat to pin things on, and other people did that as well. But Mandy's like Bill calls her. She's the fake fangirl, and like you said, all these other horrible things, and clearly she's not. She's got just as much fan cred as they do, if not more, but they refuse to see it because they're still 13 years old in their heads, if they're actually that far advanced.
Right.
But and the art, the interesting thing about that one, it's clearly all him, but you can see just how much even better his art is in this very last story. It doesn't look that much different, but there's little nuances. Things are a little rounder, a little less. Even when things go crazy, there's a kind of a control there that's just beautiful to look at.
Right. Well, this is the most contemporary of all the stories in the collection.
Right. And we should mention, because this is one of the two book-length stories. And the one before it, This Fan, This Monster, which is full of... it's the one where Bill really kind of goes insane and... does horrible things in a comic shop when he finally gets the power to be a comic shop employee.
To work at a comic shop, yeah.
Right. But it also is full of all these lovely little nods to classic comics as well. Like the cover, the first page of this This Monster is the first page of Fantastic Four number 51 of the Thing standing in the rain.
Right.
You get
and Bill has a Fantastic Four shirt on.
Exactly, yeah. And later on in there's the callback to the Ditko Spider-Man story where he's trapped under the rubble and he has to free himself from that.
And in this case, Bill is trapped under boxes of back issues.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just lots of little things like that, and the gigantic fight where they start to use they're not toys, they're replicas of Thor's hammer or Captain America's shield or Hellboy's right hand of doom, and so you can get actual comic book fighting there, like on page 91, the gigantic "Have at thee," and again, we should also mention that the language in this book is really, really not safe for work, 100% not safe for work, but it makes perfect sense and it's funny as hell.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you mentioned that the last two stories are book length. I mean, each of them were the individual issues of the Eltingville Club. Issue number 1 that came out in 2014, and then the second issue that came out the following year. And, I'm tempted to say that these are about the highlight artistically, I mean, not just visually, but also in terms of story, of the entire volume. Although, again, I love the story, The Marathon Men. But I think these are the most developed of the batch, just because he had an entire issue to really play things out, and also in many ways to wrap up what's going on with the Eltingville Club.
Right. And the last page of the penultimate issue there, page 98, where suddenly, after things have gone just completely to hell, you go back, and what do we have there? We have the very first meeting of the club when they're very little kids.
Right.
And to kind of juxtapose that innocence, but even in that innocence, you can see all the fights developing in those 5 panels there of that innocent little club just getting started. You can see the seeds of everything that's going to go to hell, and then you juxtapose that with the last 3 panels, which are just the sad and lonely.
Yeah, beady beady beady. It's the end of the Eltingville Club, Buck. And this is said by Jeremy because he's the one, as we see in the very first story, who seems to be obsessed with Buck Rogers, and every now and again he'll say "beady, beady, beady" to the point that it just annoys everyone else.
Right.
Not many references to Tweaky in life, but you definitely get them they're quite plentiful in the Eltingville Club.
Yeah, well, they were quite plentiful in my life too for a while.
For a while, but you don't hear many references to Tweaky anymore.
You don't live inside my head.
Maybe that's a good thing.
I think it's a very good thing.
Beady, beady, beady. Gene, do you want to move on to the next title?
I think that makes sense.
Okay. So I don't know how much of a good transition that was, but next we're going to be looking at Simon Spurrier and Ryan Kelly's Cry Havoc, issue number 1. This has come out recently from Image. And okay, what is the pitch here? What is this title about?
It's a good question. It's not exactly a werewolf story. It's a kind of it's hard to explain. It takes place over 3 distinct time periods. Our main character Lou is a musician, and she at one point gets attacked by a thing and has some sort of extra powers from that. It's a little unclear exactly what that is. She eventually winds up in a military operation with other people who've been similarly changed and have different sorts of abilities.
In some way.
In some
Maybe.
way. It's all very vague and mysterious at this point. and they're there. Apparently, there's a bargain. If they pull off this job for the military, they will be cured. At least that's what they all seem to believe is supposed to happen.
Right.
And at the end, the third time frame is sort of the present or the now, and Lou has been captured by the big bad of the book.
Right.
And you're not quite sure what's going to happen next.
Although the present and the now is referenced on the first page, but you're really not aware of that until you get to the end of this first issue.
Yeah, because the very first words are the end.
Yeah. Now, I think you did a really good job, Gene, of describing as best as you could what is going on in this first issue. Because I found it a little confusing even after going back to reread it a couple of times. I think I can get a vague sense of the story, but there are a lot of holes in this first issue. I think more narrative holes than I would like in a number one issue. And, after reading and then rereading and then rereading again this first issue of Cry Havoc, what I did was I went to the Image website to look at the solicit, and I want to read not all of the solicit, but at least the part of it that tells us the story, okay? It says, it's an all-new series mixing the hard-boiled militaria of Jarhead and the dark folklore of Pan's Labyrinth. Includes an unprecedented use of multiple colorists, and they list the colorists. This is not the tale of a lesbian werewolf who goes to war, except it kind of is.
Yeah, well, it pretty much definitely is.
Okay, now parts of this do make sense. Other parts of it don't, at least with this first issue. So, for instance, the werewolf part, yes. Lesbian, perhaps, but that's not entirely clear in this first issue, although I can see where they're going here. The hard-boiled militaria, perhaps. The folklore of Pan's Labyrinth, I'm not exactly sure I see it in this first issue.
Oh, they're not there yet.
Yeah, exactly. So, and this is by far not the only series where the solicit for the first issue kind of encapsulates the first narrative arc, but you don't necessarily see everything in this first issue. I think that a lot of this will be played out in the issues to come, and I'm hoping within the first narrative arc. It's very similar to the experience that Gwen and I had last week when we looked at issue number 1 of Mirror, and that was one that, as much as I liked that first issue, and I like this first issue of Cry Havoc, but it just strikes me as the kind of number 1 issue that leaves me wanting more, and not necessarily in a helpful way, but to the degree that I'm wondering if I should wait for the trade in order to read this first narrative arc instead of getting the individual issues as they come out. Because with Mirror number 1, I actually did read the solicit as well, and the solicit is similar to this. It tells us a lot that is not apparent in that first issue. And I think something similar is going on here with Cry Havoc number 1.
Yeah, it could be. I guess I didn't have quite as much problem following it as you, possibly. And one of the reasons for that, and this is not necessarily the best thing either, is that we do have a lot of annotations in the back as well. The writer does give us, Spurrier does give us a big kind of a page-by-page breakdown of what's happening as you go through. And that, it helped me, but at the same time, if I've got to have those annotations to follow through, it makes me a little sad that the story itself doesn't give me that.
Exactly, and I'm glad that you mentioned the annotations in the back, because when I first saw the annotations, and this is 1, 2, 3 pages of annotations, I did a double take. I mean, not literally a double take, but I did a mental double take, and I'm wondering, is Spurrier really annotating what he has just told us? And my reaction is similar to what you had mentioned. I felt it a little sad that he needed to rely on annotations in order for us to understand or get a better grasp of what's going on in this first issue. Personally, I think that, especially with a single issue like this, the story should stand on its own. right?
Yeah,
that if you need those annotations, wait for the trade, okay? If you have essays that set a context, I remember about a year and a half ago, Kunk and I were talking about the essay at the very end of issue number 1 of Bitch Planet, and my argument then was the essay's there to help us find the significance of what we had just read. And I didn't necessarily like that in the very first issue of this series, but I thought that the essay would have been perfect for the trade. Same thing here with the annotations in Cry Havoc number 1. I would feel much more comfortable with these being in the trade collection, but in the first issue, if I have to rely on these to make sense of what's going on in just this one single issue, that doesn't portend well.
Yeah, to be honest, there's not a lot that it really. I mean, it cleared up some things for me, like the character of Tengu. Like I didn't quite catch what was going on the Tengu page when they're on the helicopter, because it's really not explained at all on the page. But I'm torn because I'm a process junkie. I love to read about how things were made. But at the same time, like you said, for the first issue, it kind of feels like it's almost too soon for that. I would rather just kind of just let me get lost in the story for a while. Like you said, wait for the trade to give us that kind of stuff. Again, I love annotations. I learned a good bit from this. I thought it was interesting, the idea behind the 3 different colorists and how they set off the 3 different time frames, because the 3 different colorists use 3 very different color palettes.
Right.
There's a main color for each. The present is red, the earliest is blue, and the middle is yellow, to a certain extent. And again, the middle part, especially the coloring, is really kind of interesting, and there's a lot of kind of interesting kind of shading effects and stuff happening in the war part, which again is kind of my least interesting. Narratively, it's my least interesting part, but visually, I kind of like it the best.
Yeah, I agree.
But it's strange to have things spelled out so explicitly. Again, I'm torn because normally I like this stuff, but it just seemed, again, maybe it's just a bit of it just being too soon.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you on really liking to see the process. I really appreciated when creators pull back the curtain, so to speak, and show us the scaffolding lying underneath, how they did what they did. So we have sketches, we have things like this, annotations and whatnot. But again, I come back to this being the first issue. It's just too soon. And I'm also a big believer that a story should stand on its own, especially one that is just starting off like this. So if I need supplemental material to help me through, at least to some degree, this first issue, that doesn't give me a strong feeling about what the rest of this series is going to be. And I don't know. I'm wondering. I don't want to be too negative, but the critical side of me wonders if maybe they included the annotations in back as a way of kind of padding things out a bit. But maybe I'm not being fair here.
Yeah, it didn't really feel like that to me. It felt a little almost self-congratulatory a little bit, because part of it was a little like, look how clever this is.
Yes,
which it is. It's doing things narratively that I haven't seen done in this way before. But I kind of would rather kind of experience that for myself rather than being told, "Hey, look what we're doing." That's kind of my feeling on it.
Yeah, the way you put it, I think, is much better than the way I was attempting to express my feelings about the annotations in the back. It's almost like self-congratulatory, and there is something a tad, not completely, but a tad off-putting for me.
A little. And one thing, and this is not really on them, it's on the production of the book. If you're going to have annotations for every single page, could you please put page numbers on the pages? Because if it says page 17, I can't flip to page 17. I've got to count to page 17.
Right.
And that's really annoying. And that's a really tiny little nitpicky thing. But if you're going to have those kind of annotations, you kind of need the tag to jump back to.
Oh, I don't think it's so nitpicky at all. I mean, I think that that's an important critique, because if you're going to include annotations and reference those by page number, then give us the page numbers. And this is where maybe a title like Cry Havoc really needs a strong editor. You know, one of the things with
a production designer.
Exactly. It has a different business model than, let's say, DC and Marvel, right? And, you know, even though they may not do the best job from one issue to another, you know, those issues have editors. They have people who can take a look at things and critique and to provide more cohesion. You don't necessarily have this with everything coming out of Image. Sometimes you do. I don't know if this one did. It would just strike me that a good editor would take a look at this at the annotation section, those 3 pages, and say, hey, wait a minute. What are these page numbers referring to? Because we don't have page numbers here. I mean, that's just a simple, basic observation here. But
yeah. Although, again, it works better in a single issue than it would if this were a trade and it would say page 57, I would just go insane.
Yeah.
If there were no page 57 in there for a 22-page story, I mean, it doesn't take that long to count the pages, but it's kind of silly.
Yeah.
But if they do this, if he's going to annotate every issue and put the annotations in the trade, for God's sake, please just give us the page numbers. It would be so much better.
Right. Yeah. You know, it's interesting. We've talked more about the paratext and the layout of Cry Havoc #1 than we have the story itself.
Yeah, I'm a big paratext guy too. I'm processing paratext. That's all me.
Processing paratext. You know, I think it's interesting though. You know, our protagonist, someone named Louise or Lou Canton, encounters some kind of werewolf type thing. We don't know exactly what it is yet, and it gives her some kind of powers or sensibility that apparently it's given other people that she meets in that military section that you pointed out earlier.
Yeah, although everybody seems to have a different sort of thing, because hers manifest themselves when she's playing. She's a violinist, and they manifest themselves around sensations, and she kind of gets overtaken by the sensations. It doesn't seem to be what the other people, at least a little bit that we get of the other special folk on the helicopter. I don't think we were giving them a kind, like there's an overall title.
Right, and that's why, and I agree with you, that Afghanistan section, which is actually probably the largest of this first issue, is the least satisfying to me. I mean, not visually. I think visually it is, I agree with you, stunning, but story-wise, there are just a lot of holes there that need to be filled.
Yeah, and for me, part of that is it's the first issue of things. Of something, so there's going to be some of those holes, but again, since the annotations start to fill those holes already for us, it's a little bit like, well, if you're going to tell us annotations, couldn't it have been in the story at the same time?
Right. Well, Gene, before we get to the last title that we're going to be discussing this week, we want to let our listeners know of another sponsor of this episode of the Comics Alternative, and that is Just Coffee Co-op. It's a great place to get coffee, tea, and chocolates. All of their coffee is 100% fair trade, it's shade-grown, and it's organic certified. What's more, everything is roasted to order. They roast only in small batches, no mass production.
And they roast it in Madison, Wisconsin. Wisconsin is my home state, so it's even better that way.
Yeah.
And they have a coupon code. Use the coupon code COMICS when you check out, COMICS. You can get 10% off your order. Shipping is always free. There's no minimum orders from justcoffee.coop. Again, the URL is justcoffee.coop.
And that's right. Use our coupon code COMICS and you'll get 10% off, and it'll also help the podcast. So it's a win-win situation. Go to Just Coffee Co-op. It's a great place to get caffeinated.
It's your Comics Go Juice.
Hey, that's good. I like that. The Comics Go Juice. So the last title that we're going to be discussing is The Dark and Bloody. This is the latest new title from Vertigo. written by Shawn Aldridge with art by Scott Godlewski. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Now, I'm not familiar with other work that Shawn Aldridge has done. I know he did a series for 215 Inc. a few years ago, Vic Boone, but I'm not familiar with that. But Godlewski is the illustrator of Copperhead, which is an Image comic, and I really like Copperhead.
Okay, I'm not familiar with any of those either.
Yeah, but this is really good. So, Dark and Bloody #1 is a new Vertigo title, so it's not part of that original 12 new issues that they began several months ago. And in fact, those are the series that Kunka and I discussed last month. Well, this is a new one since then. And I don't know, what did you think of the Dark and Bloody?
It's not the Vertigo that I remember, because I was there at Vertigo from like day one, and it doesn't. I guess this is what Vertigo is now. It's just not the kind of thing that I'm used to from them. I'm not expressing that well. We've got another story that I guess is a link to Cry Havoc as well, because there's some kind of a post-war trauma that's happening here as well, even though it's only on one page or so.
Yeah, we got a theme going here.
Yeah, we do. In at least in these two single issues. It's a kind of a backwoods survival kind of story. I'm not quite sure what to make of it, I suppose.
Yeah. See, it's interesting that you say that this is not the Vertigo that you remember. I think that in some ways this is a very Vertigo title, at least the Vertigo that we've been getting over the past, let's say, 10 years.
Which I had not followed much at all.
Yeah.
So that's on me.
Yeah. A very strong supernatural mystery twist to it. And what we have here in this story is, I don't know if you'd call him the protagonist, but at least the narrator for much of this first issue, and this is a man by the name of Irish Gentry. And when we first see him, he is a young kid. This is a flashback, and he is carrying a sack, and something's in the sack. And he says, "I knew how to kill before I knew how to kiss. I suppose that was the case for most folks growing up in the hollers in Black Lick Hollow, Kentucky. The isolation always made death a little more likely than love. I was 7 when he and I first met." And we find out that what he is carrying is a bag of pups that are the result of a coyote and a dog mating. And his father tells Iris that, you don't really need these things. They're just more mouths to feed, and they're going to be a lot of trouble. And he tasks his son Iris at this young age by throwing them in the river to drown them. And his advice to him is, don't look in the bag, because that way it'll be easier to do. And then that carries us to a more present time where Iris is in Iraq in 2004, I believe it is. And
Yep.
So that metaphor of not looking in the bag in order to get through things is the way that he went through the Iraq experience. And then soon after that, we come up to the present day when Iris is back in Black Lick Hollow. He's a family man now. He's got one son and another one on the way, and he manufactures in Black Lick Hollow moonshine. And that's how they make some of their money. And so that's the premise of this story. Now, the mystery part, the supernatural part, I think comes relatively late in this first issue. I don't think too late. I do think that issue #1 of The Dark and Bloody does a better job of setting things up in a more satisfying way than, let's say, Cry Havoc #1 did. I mean, obviously there's mystery at the end of this first issue. It has you wanting to anticipate, issue #2 and then 3, but in a good way. Not feeling that it was incomplete.
Yeah, well, the mystery shows up a little bit in the car crash that happens kind of smack dab in the middle of the story, but it's so vague that it's hard to tell what's going on.
Okay, I see. I think of the car crash as more toward the end. It's in the second half, in other words.
Yeah, it's pretty much halfway through the book. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I guess I should have counted the pages. I just got a feel that it happened toward the end. Now, what this thing is, what this mystery is, we don't know, but there are feathers involved. So whatever creature is attacking, I guess, the two guys who have just bought the moonshine from Iris and who are driving back, they crash, and then this creature, whatever it is, takes them, I assume, because the men are not at the crash site, and it leaves feathers, and whatever these black feathers are, we don't know. Another thing that I really enjoy about this mystery is in the scene that follows right after that crash scene. And this is when Iris's son, and I can't remember his name.
Shiloh.
Shiloh, yes. Okay, Shiloh is with a new friend that he has met, that his parents hasn't yet met. And this is a young girl. I guess she's about his age, maybe a little older. And they're looking at a frog that they've cut open, kind of like you would dissect it in junior high.
Right.
And let me see, Shiloh says, I was expecting there to be more to it. And then this young girl says, how so? Shiloh responds, I don't know, like more guts and blood. And then what the girl says here seems to have a lot of weight to it. She says, well, you never know what's inside something until you cut it open. Even then, it's not always what it seems. And it just strikes me that that is a significant enough statement, especially from this mysterious character, because even by the end of this first issue, we don't know much of anything about her.
Right.
But it just seems that this is what may go to some extent explaining this mystery in The Dark and Bloody.
And that's and she's teaching Shiloh. That's his name, right? Shiloh.
Yeah.
She's teaching him exactly the opposite lesson that his dad was taught. His dad is taught, don't look in the bag.
That's right.
Says, you don't know what's inside something until you cut it open. Mm-hmm. So the son is being brought into a world that the father, I suppose in some ways metaphorically, is trained not to do. He's trained to not try to look deeper into things where the son wants to and is being encouraged to. So I'm guessing that's setting up some badness to come.
Yeah. You know, and there's something else about this new friend of Shiloh's that I wanted to ask you about. Toward the very end of this issue, you have Iris, his wife, and Shiloh sitting at the dinner table, and they're talking about this or that. And Shiloh mentions, the new friend that he's met. He mentions that it is a young girl. And the mother says, well, maybe we'll need to meet her soon. And then there's a page where we see this girl, I guess girl, standing outside their window, and she's holding one of those aforementioned feathers, and it's bloodied. Does she seem like an adult to you as she's standing there at that window looking inside? She doesn't seem like a kid.
No, I think, but it's if you look at the first appearance of her on that page with the frog, the way she's drawn, her profile looks older than her face looks head on. I don't think it's the fact that she's an adult. I think it's just that the artist is, when the artist draws her in profile, she looks older.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but it still strikes me that in that last scene when she is outside looking in, she just looks quite adult in ways that she didn't even in previously in profile. And I don't know. I'm wondering if, is she supposed to be young in this scene when she's outside looking in, or
I think it's just an artist not being totally in control. That's how it feels to me.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe I want the artist to be in more control, and so maybe I'm trying to excuse this because I do like Godlewski's work. In Copperhead. I don't know, maybe the subsequent issues of Dark and Bloody will give me more information here. I don't know.
Yeah, we really only see her on those 2 pages, so there's not a lot of cues, kind of visual cues to go by so far.
Yeah.
I can see what you're saying. I don't see it myself, but I can see why you would see it.
Yeah. And then the last 2 pages of this first issue is this kind of creepy, mysterious, I guess, mountain man, and he thinks that there are evil portents out there. And he wonders, the devils come to dance in the holler. Now, what is this? I don't know. but it has something to do with whatever creature has the black feathers.
Yeah, and it's also interesting that that last page of him with the, I guess, what is Cecil? Cecil's is a possum. Yeah, I think that with him there.
Oh yeah, his pet possum.
His pet possum, Cecil, because of course a possum would be named Cecil. Why wouldn't it? But you look at that page of him, then jump back 2 pages to look at Aya, the girl, and those pages kind of mirror each other. She's looking off to the she's staring to the right, but it's in profile, and the next one he's staring to the left in profile. I wonder if we're supposed to see some sort of parallel between those 2 characters somehow.
That makes sense because you do have an interesting visual juxtaposition here.
Yeah.
Yeah, these 2 full-page images in profile separated only by Cecil the possum.
Yeah, so that was my thought. That we don't know who this guy is, but there's some connection probably between him and the girl, and it probably, if it's not good, it's at least it's at least questionable.
Right. I like this first issue of The Dark and Bloody. I like it because of this perhaps protagonist, Irish Gentry. I mean, he seems like an interesting enough character from what we see. I also like the thematic setup of, do you look inside to find out what something's all about? Do you not look inside in order to feel better about it? I really enjoyed that part of this first issue. So I think that both Aldridge and Godlewski did a great job of setting up this new series. And I don't know if this is a limited series. I don't think that Vertigo has mentioned if this is going to be an ongoing or if it's going to be limited to 8 issues or something of the sort.
Yeah, at least, I haven't followed Vertigo recently, but usually when companies do that, it's clear from the first issue. It'll say 1 of 8 or something like that.
Not always.
They don't do that? Okay.
Well, especially
back in the day they used to, Sonny.
Yeah. Now, Image is notorious about that, but I do think that if it is a limited series, Vertigo, more times than not, if not every time, will let us know that this is 1 of 4 or 1 of 12. Mm-hmm. But we don't have that indication with The Dark and Bloody, as far as I know.
Yeah. There's nothing in the paratext to jump back to that. To let us know that. And you said that you thought that Iris was pretty an interesting character. I found him really kind of bland and boring. For me, the point of interest is the 2 kids. That to me, even though there's not in it that much, it seems to me that it feels to me like that might be really where the meat of the story is going. I could kind of care less about Iris himself, but the kids seem like that might be where the fun is going to be.
Yeah. Well, see, I agree with you that Iris is kind of bland, but I think his blandness is interesting because it sets up a contrast to what we see, this young girl talking about, after they're cutting into the frog. Mm-hmm. I liked The Dark and the Bloody, and maybe because I'm predisposed to liking most things from Vertigo, or maybe it's just I'm wanting Vertigo to be more successful than it has been over the past few years. Maybe that's it.
That's perfectly reasonable.
Yeah. Well, Gene, we covered a lot of ground in this episode. We started off with Evan Dorkin's hilarious yet unsettling The Eltingville Club. And then after that, we looked at Simon Spurrier and Ryan Kelly's Cry Havoc. And then we wrapped up with The Dark and Bloody #1, written by Shawn Aldridge with art by Scott Godlewski. Sorry, I keep mispronouncing his name. Godlewski. So, interesting titles, and we recommend that you guys check them all out, especially the Eltingville Club.
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah. And if you want to find great comics like this, then you would do well to check out the website of our sponsor, which is Discount Comic Book Service. Go to their website, dcbservice.com. They'll treat you well. You'll find great discounts. You should also check out the website of our other sponsor for this episode, and that is Just Coffee Co-op. Go to justcoffee.coop, get a lot of great coffee, tea, and chocolates into your shopping cart, and upon checkout, make sure you use the coupon code COMICS. That's right, for 10% off of your order. And after you do get your comics and coffee, get in touch with us and let us know the kind of things you're going to be reading and drinking. If you go to our website, comicsalternative.com, you'll see that you can leave us a voice message through SpeakPipe, just as Anthony did. We'd like to hear from you, just as we heard from Anthony.
Yes.
That's right. But, if you like to do things the old-fashioned way, you can pick up the phone and dial 415-3-COMICS. That's 415-326-6427. You can also email us. We're 2guys@comicsalternative.com. You can email me directly. I'm Derek@comicsalternative.com. And Gene, how can they get in touch with you?
I am unsurprisingly Gene with the G at comicsalternative.com.
It's neat how that works. You can also get in touch with us via a variety of social networking sites, such as Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, Google+, Goodreads, Pinterest, and YouTube. You can subscribe to the podcast through iTunes. You can stream us on Stitcher. You can also find us on TuneIn. And you can find, as always, every single one of our episodes, as well as the reviews and the comics-related commentary that we post on the blog. And that's at our website, comicsalternative.com.
We are everywhere.
That's right. And we do like to hear from you. And we also want to remind you, once again, please do take a couple of minutes and visit our survey site. That's survey.libsyn, libsyn.com/comicsalternative. 6 quick questions, and if you input your email address, you'll be entered into a drawing for an official Comics Alternative t-shirt when we get them printed up.
Be one of the cool kids. Wear our shirt.
That's right. You can be as cool as the kids from the Eltingville Club.
That is that a selling point?
Okay, that's a good point.
I guess it's a selling point.
Yeah. So let us hear from you. And until next time, I'm Derek.
And I'm Gene.
We'll see you later.
Take care.
Welcome to Eltingville. We are the comic book and science fiction, horror, fantasy, and homely club. Rated protectors, super collectors, the Eltingville Club, the Eltingville Club. Welcome to Eltingville. We'll spend lots of money on major violence, boogie, school, and ultra money. There's nothing wrong with us. There's nothing wrong with us. The Eltingville Club, the Eltingville Club.